questions and answers period. I hope I have most of the answers. As Ron said, I'm with the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute. I've been doing hydrogen projects for about 25 years. I built what we call the world's first proton exchange membrane fuel cell powered car back in 1989-92. And that was a pretty interesting project. Now everybody's doing it. All the major car companies are coming out with fleets of hydrogen vehicles, and you see fleets of, at least the beginning of fleets of fuel cell hydrogen fueled buses. And I'll talk a bit in my project brief about some buses that we're bringing here to the Hilo area. So a few words about the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute. I know several of you know about us, and I hear from my friends over here that we may have a bit of a checkered history. And well, that was like 30 years ago or so, and hopefully we've moved on. And I think also the the laws and the concern for the environment has also moved on. I think everybody is much more concerned with the environment. And hopefully some of those projects that, I found out about from Bob and didn't know quite how bad it was until I saw his pictures that he shared with me tonight, that we don't have any repeats of that, because yes, it was pretty awful what our project that we teamed up there. We are part of the University of Hawaii. We were formed by the legislature in 1974 to basically, our mission is to get the state off of fossil fuels. And we were put under the administration of the university to carry out that objective. We work in many renewable energy areas: biofuels, solar, electrical batteries, energy efficiency. I'm not going to go through the whole list. But I want to focus on our hydrogen experience. We've been in the hydrogen game at HNEI for over 20 years. We were named the U.S. Department of Energy Center of Excellence in Hydrogen Research about 15, 20 years ago. We have our own hydrogen production and storage system in downtown Honolulu, and that's been in operation for almost 10 years. And it's in the middle of a built-up area on Cook Street, down by Kapiolani Boulevard, between Kapiolani and King Street, right across the street from the Lexus dealership service center. So that's where we are there. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about hydrogen to start with, and then go through my research project, talk about the program safety, and then open it up for questions and answers. So what is hydrogen? It's basically the most plentiful element in the universe. It's found in water. As you look out over the ocean, that's an ocean of hydrogen basically, but it's connected to oxygen, and that's water. It's also found in biomass and also in fossil fuels. It can be produced by the electrolysis of water, which is applying electrical energy to water and using electrical energy to break the bond that holds the hydrogen and oxygen molecules together. And it's pretty energy intensive. The electrolyzer that we're using in this experiment is around 65 kilowatt hours of electricity to break that bond. That's quite a lot of energy. And to make this economically viable, we really need inexpensive sources of electrical energy. And that can be geothermal, it can be wind, in some cases it can be solar if the solar array is big enough. But it does require the application of energy in all cases to break the bond. And if you have a biofuel, a biomass, or a fossil fuel, they usually use heat energy to break that bond. It's lighter than air, so it disperses very quickly. It actually travels about 65 feet per second, straight up. If it's released, that's about 45 miles an hour. So if I released a molecule of hydrogen right now, of gas, and said 1001, it'd be 65 feet above this building. And that's one of the characteristics that make hydrogen provide some safety in the use of hydrogen as a fuel. Its energy content, we measure hydrogen in kilograms, which is a mass, and it has approximately the same, 1 kilogram has the same energy content as a gallon of gasoline. So when you see our electrolyzer, it produces 65 kilograms of hydrogen per day, which is equivalent to about 65 gallons of gasoline. So that kind of shows you the scope of the size of this particular project. So why should we be interested in hydrogen in Hawaii? Well, it really has the potential to displace fossil fuels and that are used for transportation. And by doing that, it provides energy security for Hawaii. It can be manufactured or produced from any of our indigenous renewable energy resources: biomass, solar, wind, geothermal, ocean energy, anything that we have, we can eventually make hydrogen out of it through a process. And it retains money in Hawaii, because right now we ship out, basically, I'm sure you've heard the ads and seen some of the things on TV, we ship out $6 to $7 billion of money per year to bring these fossil fuels in. And of course we don't use that fossil fuel very efficiently. And so that is money that goes out of the economy, that if we kept it in our economy, we could do other things with it, provide jobs for our people here, and support probably a higher standard of living, because we're not shipping all that money out. So I want to talk about my research project, and I do want to emphasize this is a research project. Some people think that we're planning to build this big industrial plant at PGD, and we're not. We simply are doing a research project. So I'm going to give you an overview of it. Basically, starting at the PGD site, we're producing the hydrogen using an electrolyzer, which I'll show you pictures of our electrolyzer. That is compressed into hydrogen trailers, delivery trailers like this, into high-pressure composite cylinders, and towed using a F450 diesel truck to 2 sites where we will be dispensing the hydrogen for fuel cell electric vehicles, in this case shuttle buses. And this is what the shuttle bus looks like. There will be one operated by MTA, and the plan is to use it as a feeder service in the local area here to bring people who are not on the main bus route closer to the main bus route. And also 2 similar buses or replica buses at Hawaii Volcano National Park to be used to transport the visitors around the park. And that's been ongoing for about 5 years, and we're finally at the stage where the buses have been purchased and are being converted. This is what the dispensers will look like. I don't know if you can see it, but it'll look like a regular gasoline dispenser at your gas station. The look and feel will be the same. The only difference is the nozzle that's used to fill the bus will be actually clamped onto the receptacle on the bus, and there'll be a gas type fitting, as opposed to having your gasoline hose and just pouring gasoline into this open tube, which is what we do now. So what are the objectives of this research? Basically, we want to be able to evaluate the economics of producing hydrogen as a transportation fuel using this electrolyzer. And in particular, we're looking at the durability of these electrolyzers as a variable load. You can look at the electrolyzer in some ways as like a battery, and it can ramp up and down depending on what the energy input is. For example, if you're on a wind farm and you have variable gusty wind, and you're trying to make hydrogen from that wind, the electrolyzer is going to have to follow that input, electrical input, which means it's going to ramp up and down. And normally, electrolyzers operate at steady state. They're plugged into the main electrical grid, operate at steady state, and there's a certain level of degradation over time. The question is, when you're using them in a variable load, like what is the level of degradation? Because that will affect your overall cost of producing hydrogen over time. If they only last 2 or 3 years, and you have to replace them, well, that may be a cost, but an additional cost, and will impact the cost of your hydrogen. So we want to see what the effect is of using these as a variable load over time. And what this bullet points out is looking at the intermittency of wind and solar, and this could be an offset to that to allow more of that to be used on the grid. We also want to look at the performance of these buses over time, see how well they operate, get the customer experience, and look at the overall economics. I want to point out this is not right now the economics, this is a research project, so everything costs more than it should right now. For example, the bus is $500,000. That's to buy the gasoline version of that bus, pull out the engine, and put in a fuel cell power system. Clearly, that's way too expensive for a 19-passenger shuttle bus. But as the technology continues to improve, those costs will come down. For example, full-size transit buses have already dropped about 40 or 50% from what they were 5 or 6 years ago, when they were about $2.5 million to buy a 40-foot transit bus. Now they're coming down quickly. Also, the fuel cells are more dependable. And I have a slide we'll talk about later, but United Technologies has a fuel cell that's worked for 17,000 hours without a defect. And that's probably longer than a diesel engine operates without having to have some maintenance on it. So the technology is rapidly improving over time. Okay, I don't know how well you can see this, but I think a lot of you know where PGV is. And this is the aerial view PGV site, and this is where we're going to be placing the system. This is if you can kill it's the second from the right. There you go. Yeah. Okay. So these pipes are not there now. This is a pipe laydown yard originally, and so that's the footprint. It's about an acre. We're not using the full acre for this project, but that's what's been allocated to us for the project. This is the layout of the equipment, and basically the hydrogen production and compression is all going to be done in this 40-foot shipping container. And then these are chillers, a chiller for the compressor to keep it cool as it compresses gas, and we have another chiller unit for the electrolyzer. They look like your air conditioner heat exchangers that you have outside your house. They have fans, and so they suck in air and soak up the heat from the cooling system, and it cycles into the. This is where the trailers will be parked. There's a fueling post between the 2 trailers. We've got space for 2 trailers. Overall, the project will have 3 of these trailers, but they will be 2 of them will always be at a dispensing site, and there'll be 1 filling. So that's how we will be operating the filling. Each trailer holds 105 kilograms of hydrogen at 450 bar. Here's a picture of the electrolyzer.
How much CSI is that?
About 6,300 PSI. Here's what the electrolyzers look like. They're not going to be outside. They'll be inside those ISO containers. They're about 6.5 feet tall by 8.5, 9 feet wide. And I've got some dimensions on the next slide. So it's a very small unit. It's about that high. It's about as wide as this table. It's not an industrial plant. So this is the electrolyzer again, same picture, 6.5 feet high, 8 feet wide. It has a power supply in this cabinet, and you can see the cooling unit. You see the two little fans on top there. Like I said, it looks like your air conditioner at your house. So in this case, it requires an electrolyte, and this is a solid electrolyte. There are other electrolyzers that have a liquid electrolyte, which is like a phosphoric acid. It's highly corrosive. Whereas this is like a piece of plastic. Like actually, it almost, it looks a lot like the material that's used to make these bottles. And so you're not dealing with any liquid hazardous materials in this electrolyzer, and that makes it very attractive. It will produce 65 kilograms of hydrogen working flat out over 24 hours, but we're not planning to run this flat out. As I said, we want to vary the load on the electrolyzer, so it'll be ramping up and down depending on what the load profile is that we want to test. So it will not be producing that much on a daily basis. Yes?
Just very quickly, are there any side products besides the hydrogen? When you remove the hydrogen, what's left?
The side product, the electrolysis process is oxygen, which is vented to the atmosphere in this case, although the local fish farmer has asked if we could supply him with our oxygen, because fish farmers like using oxygen because it gives about 25 to 30% more fish production on a basic unit of feed, because that little fish doesn't have to swim so hard to get oxygen over his gills. So this is a good thing. And this can be part of our economic analysis to say, well, look, why are we just bending this hot oxygen off into the air? Why can't we put fish farms and be growing protein, next to electrolyzer plants in the future? And yes, ma'am.
You said it's 65 kilowatts to break the bond. How much hydrogen does 65 kilowatts make?
It produces 1 kilogram, which is equivalent to a gallon of gasoline. And we use just a little bit of water, basically 14 gallons per hour, and about a third of that is rejected. And basically the water comes in, it's pure, it goes in the electron. There's always some that doesn't use all of it, and so that's sent out. So probably cleaner than the water that goes in because it's gone through filters and deionizers to take stuff out of it. Okay, so this is the site in Hilo at the Mass Transit Agency, Hele bus service. It's kind of a hard place to find. Many may not have even know what it is, but there's the airport. It's in this industrial section right here, and this is what it looks like on the ground. These are existing fueling tanks, a diesel tank and gasoline tank, and this is the footprint where we intend to put the fueling dispenser, which is this unit here. So I put this little cartoon together showing the process where the hydrogen is delivered in this trailer, the transport trailer, and it parks it in this area here. There'll be a dispenser on a pad about in that area. You can see right there on the diagram, there are those tanks right there. We build a firewall between the trailers and the existing tanks. That's in accordance with codes and standards. So they've got a 2-hour fire rating. And the pad that they sit on is going to be a concrete pad that we'll pour there. Yes, ma'am.
Is this a volcano? This unit is at volcano?
This one is in Hilo, which will support the Mass Transit Agency bus, and that's part of this EA. But we're building a similar one. It's kind of a different layout just because of the way Pavo is up in Volcano. But yes, we're putting one. It'll be exactly the same, with being able to park 2 trailers and have this fueling kiosk, just like your regular gas station dispenser. Yeah. And so there's some supporting infrastructure here, communications. We send process air to be able to open and shut valves at the kiosk and here at the fueling post. And then of course it fuels the bus. And the bus operates at 350 bar, which is 5,000 psi. That's the hydrogen pressure. So a little bit more about the hydrogen delivery trailer and delivery. So it's going to be hauled by a pretty big F450 truck. We probably have lots of them here, and we're going to use diesel, and we're going to use biodiesel from Pacific Biodiesel to run the truck. So we have like a total loop of green hydrogen and green truck. It is approved by the U.S. Department of Transportation. They come in and inspect the truck. They do tests on the tanks, and they certify it. And it's good. Certification is good for 5 years, and then they take the tanks out, and it's like your scuba tanks. You have to get them recertified every 5 years. But they are certified for use on U.S. public roads. The drivers will be certified commercial driver's license and trained. Total hydrogen will be 105 kilograms, which is equivalent to 105 gallons of gasoline. And I just put this out, that's compared to a gasoline tanker can carry up to 9,000 gallons of gasoline, which is 90 times more than what we're carrying. Now there's different sizes of gasoline tanker trucks, of course, but that's probably one of the big ones. Yes.
What's the difference in efficiency between the gasoline and hydrogen engines? I mean, you're making a comparison there.
Yeah, it's roughly, and I've got another slide to show, but it's roughly twice the efficiency of a gasoline or a diesel engine. In fact, it's twice as efficient as a diesel engine, so it's probably even more efficient than a gasoline engine, because a gasoline engine isn't quite as efficient as a diesel, as you know. Yes?
You're saying similar question. 60% efficiency out of it, because of the fuel cell?
That,
60% net efficiency, because gas usually 20, diesel 30.
That's correct. Yes.
That's hard to believe, honestly.
Well,
all the processes in between with production until it actually.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you. I'm talking about the efficiency of the actual fuel cell power plant in the vehicle itself. I'm not talking about the round trip or the overall efficiency of the whole process. An electrolyzer is roughly, depending on the type of electrolyzer, it can be from 50 to 60% efficiency. I'd say 55 is probably, about right. But different technologies have different efficiencies. So you lose about half of your electrical energy if you're talking electrolysis, just making the hydrogen. And then you're losing about half of that again by using a fuel cell. So if you look at starting with this lump of electricity, I'm getting about 25% of that returned back. So that's why it's really important that you have a very low cost of electricity going into this process to get your efficiency. Or get, not your efficiency, but get your costs down to make it an economic process.
Kind of right on, so I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Just a quick question. How much octane you guys?
Oh, we never look at octane because we're not actually burning it like in an engine.
Oh, okay.
We're using an electrochemical device. In fact, it's pretty neat. It's a bunch of plates separated once again by this kind of plastic.
So it's not like the
No, it's not like
Myers
no, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
This is not using platinum or any of these very expensive metals for the membrane in that system.
Yes, it does use platinum in the fuel cell. It's part of the catalyst to break the hydrogen into a proton and a hydrogen ion.
And the membranes, as far as, that's typically been the issue with the durability. You're really thinking it's going to be anywhere near this?
Yes. mention, I don't know if I said this before, but United Technology, yeah, 17,000 hours. That's a lot of hours on a fuel cell without a defect in the fuel cell itself. I mean, you know, look at that, how many years of operation. If you look at your car and you say, gee, I travel an average of 30 miles an hour over the life of the car, you know.
What's the degradation curve on that, over those hours? You know,
Well, it depends on the fuel cell manufacturer. I mean, different guys have different performance values. There's a variety of fuel cells out there. But, you know, if you track it over 17,000 hours, it's not a very, very big degradation curve. And that's still going. I mean, that's where they are today, but that fuel cell is still operating. They're looking at having these fuel cells operate for 25,000 hours. And right now, they're willing to give a warranty of 15,000 hours. So, now when we talk about the platinum loading is getting less and less as they start experimenting with nanomaterials to reduce the amount of platinum. And also, you can recover that platinum. So in a car, if you look at a car engine right now, General Motors is saying that the amount of platinum they use in their fuel cell in an SUV, like we have in Oahu, is equivalent to the amount of platinum you have in your catalytic converter in the car. And that most of that is recoverable. You get about 90–95% of that back when you're ready to scrap the car.
Oh, yeah, so everyone out here is doing it, believe me.
Yeah, right.
They're on top of it.
Okay. So, let's talk a little bit about the bus. This is what it looks like. Now, this bus was specified by the National Park, by Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Specified this bus as 19-passenger Eldorado bus, and they spec'd that out and bought 2 of them with gasoline engines in them, and they've shipped them over to Honolulu and an outfit called the Hawaii Center for Advanced Transportation Technology, and then US Hybrid is converting them over to a fuel cell bus. Now, the first one is being converted by the Air Force, and they're paying the upfront cost of what we call non-recurring engineering. That's worth $750,000 to the project. And then, of course, the Park Service and our project are leveraging that investment by having the follow-on buses. So these 2 buses, the first bus will be ready, delivered by the end of June next year, and the second one by the end of September, and then our 4th in line by the end of next year, sometime in December. So, take a long time, we're one-ofs, but this will be a full fuel cell electric vehicle. No, hardly any noise except for some fan noise, and the only emission is pure water. It's totally silent, about 150-mile range, and we carry 19 passengers. Yes, sir.
So like with containment, how long can the hydrogen be detained, and what do you do if it begins to leak? How do you...
Okay, great question. Hydrogen, unlike a battery, doesn't have a shelf life. You might be limited by the codes and standards of when you have to retest that cylinder, but they're it's stored in high pressure gas cylinders, and if you leave it on the shelf, it's still going to be there. And if you talk about leaks, as I said, as long as you're outside, it'll go straight up, and so it'll disperse very quickly. There's another hand up over here. Okay, I'll move on.
You were just going over the dollar cost of $750,000 by the Air Force.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't see.
And then you didn't talk about the expense of the of doing the 2 park buses. And maybe I better just ask a simple question. What's the total tax dollar input here on this entire project? Tax dollar input.
Well, let me answer your first question. Each bus is $500,000, And that's all tax input, whether it's federal dollars or state dollars in there.
That's hydrogen ready, hydrogen fuel cell ready.
Absolutely. We
Okay.
have a full fuel cell power system in it. There's the actual system itself. That's the fuel cell component. That's the air filter. And here's an air blower. I'm not quite sure what that part is. So it's all, this whole project, with the exception of the contribution made by PG&E by giving us electricity to run this project, is either federal or state tax dollars. The Mass Transit Agency is also providing a driver at their cost. And over a 2-year period, that's worth about $200,000 by the time you count the man's benefits or the person's benefits and everything else like that.
Do you have a gross amount there, or?
The overall project is, it's still ramping up as I'm able to find more money. We're about $5.3 million. Just to give you an example, the hydrogen equipment is $1.8 million to buy the equipment, ship it out to Hawaii, sell it, do the training, commissioning, and getting it going. Site work, I don't know yet because I've got my construction company actually coming to, so we can finish the specification of what the site work needs to be. And also, there's 2 areas for site work, one at the MTA and there's one at PGD. But it's relatively simple stuff, but I'm amazed at how much things cost. You know, something that I would have thought was like $40,000 or $50,000. It could be $200,000 or $300,000. I mean, and especially electrical equipment, heavy power electrics is really expensive, like transformers, you know, big electric wires, all that stuff is very expensive. You have to bury it, put it in conduits. By the time you do that, it really is expensive. And that's one of the great advantages we have working at PGV, is that they already have that stuff in place, so I don't have to go out and buy and install all that infrastructure.
Now you mentioned Ormat was going to put in $750,000. Is that in kind or cash?
In kind.
That's in kind, which is basically the electricity.
So the electricity, providing a site for free. You know, water is kind of insignificant amount of water, so I wouldn't put a dollar value on that. But mainly it's the electricity. You know, if I was, I'll get you to write one note now. If I was buying this off the grid, you know, at 42 cents a kilowatt hour,
Right.
wow, that would be, you know, out of sight.
Are you going to have Mike tell us why PGV is putting up this facility?
Hey, can we, I want to do clarification.
I'd be happy to wait to the end, but everybody's been asking questions.
Yeah,
Tell me what you want to do.
Let's just do clarifications on technical stuff for now, right now, and wait on some of these, because that's going to get into a whole other discussion, and we'll address
We're
that.
here for a while.
Why don't you hold all questions to the end?
No, I think the questions on technical things are good. We can be short. It's not going to take 5 minutes to do a question.
Thanks. Ma'am.
I just wanted to know if you had factored out the cost of those shuttling trips every 3 or 4 days over the life of the project.
Yes, we have.
And if so, what's that, assuming X amount of money right now, for the cost of gasoline to do that, how much is being budgeted for that?
Yeah, let me answer it this way. We're hiring a operations and maintenance company who will maintain the equipment, operate the equipment, and also operate the trucks and deliver the trailers and pick them up. And that they're still refining their bid. We haven't contracted them yet, but it's looking at it's around $200,000 a year, ballpark. I still have to grind them down a little bit more, or they're going to grind me down some more. You know, I don't want anybody losing money because then they won't be in business and we can't do it. But that's kind of the order of magnitude of what that costs. I mean, they have to have a driver, the truck, the gas, all that kind of stuff. And by the time you add it all up, and plus, it's not just delivering the hydrogen, it's also maintaining the equipment and operating the equipment as well. So, and they need some engineering talent. They need a trained person. to operate the bus. They provide hydrogen safety training as we go along and make sure everything's being managed properly. Okay, another one? Yes, ma'am. I'm almost to the end of this, by the way, so.
Is the reason that you have a lot of plastic pieces in it because you're trying to avoid sparking? Is it liability you're reducing?
No, that's not. It's just that's the technology. When I talked about the plastic, basically it has an acid entrained inside the plastic, and the plastic can absorb water, but it means you don't have to have a liquid.
So what about the flammability issue? Is that something to be concerned about?
Well, not in the.
You're getting to that, right?
Yeah, I've got slides. Some slides I said it's okay. I'll move on. I just want to talk a little bit about bus performance because somebody raised that previously. Right, and these are full-sized 40-foot transit buses that this slide refers to. There's 26 of these on the mainland, USA. AC Transit has a fleet of, I think, about 12 of them in the Oakland area. So they have many others in Europe and in Asia. Fuel cell buses have twice the fuel economy of a diesel bus, and that's borne out with lots of data, which is reported to the U.S. It's collected by the National Research Energy Laboratory and reported yearly to the U.S. DOE, so they're not making this up. It's ultra quiet. People love riding on this bus. They will wait for the diesel bus to go by so they can ride on the fuel cell bus because it's so quiet. It's such a great experience for the passenger. Man.
What do you mean by 2 times the fuel economy?
Okay, it'll go twice as far on a diesel equivalent gallon of diesel fuel. So if you say that hydrogen has the same 1 kilogram of hydrogen has the same energy content as a gallon of diesel, the diesel bus would go 4 miles, whereas the fuel cell bus would go 8 miles. The big diesel bus gets about 4 miles per gallon. These buses are getting 8 miles per gallon. So it really reduces your operating cost, but there's other things that save money. First of all, they have regenerative braking. So instead of hitting the brakes hard, they let the bus slow down. It regenerates electricity, which goes back into a battery on the bus. So that improves efficiency. You're not wearing out your brakes. You don't have to do oil changes. The mechanics love this bus because it's not dirty and filthy. You know, it's clean technology. So when it comes in, they're not like, oh my, that's gross. So there's a lot of operations and maintenance savings by having this kind of bus. And this is part of our project. We want to show that. We're going to train the people at MTA on how to service and operate these buses and get real time, get their feedback. We're going to have customer feedback from people that are actually riding on these buses to see, hey, what's your experience been? Well, sir.
2 things I know because I've studied this a lot with propane and stuff. But what is the rated serviceability of the tank of itself? And then also, what is the volumetric efficiency? Because that's a little unfair because we know the volumetric efficiency is nowhere near electric fuel. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You're saying 1 kilogram, correct, but the volumetric efficiency and the tanks are issues too. What is this tank rated for? 3 years, 5 years?
Well,
because it's got to be a dot-approved tank, right?
The tank itself,
5 years already.
they have to be checked every 5 years. My understanding is they're good for about 15 years service life. They have to be tested twice in their lifetime, and then they're disposed of at the end of that 15 years. Now, there's been a lot of technology development in tanks. They're making them stronger and better, higher pressure. Some of the tanks in the GM vehicles in Oahu are 10,000 PSI tanks, which is very high pressure. These aren't anywhere near, these are half of that. And buses seem to have gone to 5,000 PSI, where commercial or automobiles are going to the higher pressure because they want the range. Whereas in your bus can always loop back to your fueling station, get you know, a recharge of hydrogen in 3 or 4 minutes and then go back out on his run. That's, you know, people who own a car want to be able to go 300 miles. So that's the difference. Yes, sir.
Is there any sense of how much actually a gallon of hydrogen costs these days?
Yeah, it is. Well, yeah, most.
The other question also was the water that's being emitted. Is that being saved or just wasted as if the oxygen could be?
Well, okay. Now let me ask this: the water comes out as like a vapor. So if you stand behind a fuel cell car or a bus, you'll just see this hot vapor coming out. If you're in a cold climate, it'll condense. Like if you're in freezing temperatures, it'll look like a little cloud. But it's like kind of like your air conditioner, if you kind of drip on the ground. If there's, you know, depends on what the atmospheric conditions are.
Just when we start running out of water, we'll start trying to
I don't think so. We're not going to run out of water. What was the first part of your question?
Cost analysis.
Oh yeah, okay. Right now, the cheapest way to make hydrogen is to use natural gas and run it through a process called reforming, which uses heat to crack the bond between the carbons. You know, natural gas is carbon, 1 carbon, and 4 hydrogens. So you got to break that, and that's the way they do it now on the mainland. And it all depends on your cost of your natural gas coming in. Of course, it's gone down significantly. I think it's like $2. What is it? Is what they measure natural gas in $2.50. So it's getting pretty cheap. Now, in this project, using electrolysis, if you use 64 or 65 kilowatt hours of electricity to make your gallon or your kilogram of hydrogen, it's a simple multiplication of your cost of your electricity times 65, and that'll give you the number. So if it's 2 cents a kilowatt hour, or 2 cents, I gotta do something that's easy for me to calculate. It'd be like dollar what? 30. There, thank you. A gallon equivalent.
Just the cost of the electricity.
Yeah, that's the biggest factor. Your capital costs of all your equipment is actually a pretty small portion of the cost of the hydrogen when you amortize it over many years.
What's the cost for like a gallon of hydrogen right now?
Right now?
At 42 cents, you're talking like 24 to 35.
Well, right now, in Hawaii, we import all our hydrogen from the mainland.
65 kilowatts?
About $168 a kilogram.
$168 a gallon.
Kilogram. Yeah, exactly. It's
Well,
important, isn't it? So we're going to be making it a lot cheaper here.
This thing's so into it, I could.
It's a lot cheaper as long as, you know, PGB is donating their,
Yeah, exactly. Or if I went to a wind farm and I'm using curtailed wind, and maybe the guy wants to charge me 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour for his wind, then that makes it totally viable. So, for example, South Point has the wind farm down there.
They're curtailed about 40%, I heard.
Well, I don't know that, but that's a lot. That's a lot of electricity. So you can make a lot of hydrogen with that. Or go to Parker Ranch or Lalamila, you know, where we have a county system that's being bid on right now, where we can put additional wind turbines in there and use that to support the bus. That's the county bid. Yes, sir.
Is a fuel cell not efficient enough to create your own electricity to split water?
I'm sorry, let me say this.
Is a fuel cell
Yeah.
not efficient enough to produce your own electricity to create to split the water?
There have been projects to have what they call a reversible fuel cell.
Because they do that in space. They use them for this.
I'm not quite
It's
sure.
like a complete,
Yeah,
system.
it would be, but it's not actually using a fuel cell and running electricity backwards through it to make hydrogen is not that efficient. I mean, they're different kind of animals. They need different systems to support them, so it hasn't worked out. Yes?
How much, that fuel cell, that's about 4 years operation. How much does it cost to replace a set of fuel cells?
I don't know what that cost is. It's pretty expensive right now. But I don't know what it is. UTC doesn't tell me how much of a fuel cell is, but it's expensive. As volume production comes in, they'll go down. So, a full-size transit bus now is about $1.7 million, and a lot of that is the fuel cell cost. So, where was I? Okay, I think we've been through this. Got 17,000 hours. I just want to talk about program safety. So, our supplier of our equipment.
One more question over here. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I was just curious, how much solar would you need to produce hydrogen?
Well, 65 kilowatts inside.
Yeah, you'd have to have enough.
Per kilogram.
Yeah.
So,
It'd be a pretty big solar
so
array.
let's say I do solar, that's my business, I'm an electrical contractor. So 5 sun hours a day, you have about 15 kilowatts to make 1 kilogram.
Okay. Okay, our supplier for the equipment is a company called PowerTech. You can Google them. They're a subsidiary of BC Hydro, which is one of the bigger utility companies in Canada. They've been in the fuel cell or the hydrogen business for many, many years, at least 15, 20 years. But they've made many of these hydrogen systems. They're deployed on the mainland. We're deploying another one of their systems over on Oahu right now, a fueling station. And they also do a lot of testing for the code authorities. They take tanks and they cycle them thousands of times and then they burst them. So they're also a testing organization. They sit on various codes and standards development committees. So these guys are good. They know the business, and they're very reputable. And they're going to be in business tomorrow. You know, one of the dangers of going with smaller startup companies is, can they survive? Will they honor their warranty? If something goes wrong, and are they there when you need them? All the components that go into this, there's no research. We're not designing a new electrolyzer. We're not designing new compressors. These are all off-the-shelf components that go into these systems. There's a minimum of hydrogen actually in the system. I mean, the pipe work is about, very small bore, about, maximum would be ½ an inch. So there's not a lot of hydrogen entrained in that ISO container. We don't store hydrogen in there. We store it outside. And remember my pointing out where the two tube trailers were located, and that's where we're storing the hydrogen. And then we're moving it off-site, as I explained. The design meets international and national codes. The primary code is called NFPA 2, which is specifically for hydrogen. And they're taking all the other code that were out there that were originally had something to do with hydrogen. They're trying to put them all into this one document. So it's like a one-stop shop. So it tells you your distances and all the things that you need to know for a hydrogen system.
What's
now,
the name of that?
NFPA 2. NFPA-2. So you can Google that. You can actually read the code online. I mean, you have to buy it.
Actually, you can't.
He just tried. It says it's not accessible.
Says it won't authorize me as a user. I'm going to.
Well, you can do it. There's a way. It's not like totally obvious. You can read it online, but you can't print it. They won't. They've got all this protection in, so you can actually read it. It's about $65 to buy it. So if you want to, cough up $65, that's fine. I'm not allowed to print them because they're heavily copyrighted because that's their business. Is issuing themselves. So in the documentation that we provided for the EA, we do this HAZOP analysis, hazards and operability. So I put a sample HAZOP analysis in there. That's not the one for this system because they haven't finished that one yet. But that was giving an example of the detail that goes into developing these designs and kind of the oversight that goes into it. Then we have a third party comes in and inspects the system. Now, PowerTech hires a third party to come in and inspect that and certify. It's like the UL certification. They put their stamp on it. They say, yeah, we looked at your design parameters. We've checked out the system. It meets the codes and standards. You know, you built it right, et cetera, et cetera. On HNEI's part, because they're paid by PowerTech, we have our own backup independent consultant to go in and check everybody else's work as well. So there's like 3 layers. You know, PowerTech does their job, then they have their certification authority come in, and then we have our own guy that goes in there and checks their work as well. So that we have, you know, 3 layers of people checking the safety of these systems out. Yes?
There's a safety question specifically. From my decades of experience studying the stress response, one of our biggest weaknesses is we're so caught up in the comfort in the moment that we overlook the dangers in the future to our detriment. How much hydrogen would be there? And we're putting this, you know, that's great. I mean, all this sounds great, but your goal, obviously one of the things with PGV is you get the power for free. So that your comfort level is met. Wow, that's great. It's a great opportunity. But what's the actual explosive potential of that hydrogen? How much is it? How much of an area could it blow up under the consideration of there's an earthquake, a significant earthquake? This is a very vulnerable, obviously geographical geothermal area. That's why PGV is there. What's the explosive potential of that?
I can't answer that question. I would have to go back.
To me, I would hope that before you go forward on this project at all, you have a very clear, definitive answer on that. Otherwise, the risk is that you're doing exactly what is the Achilles heel of any human's decision. If you don't have a deep understanding of your own stress response that determines every decision you make and every resource management decision, that's a nightmare waiting to happen. And I would certainly hope to know what that answer is very soon. I'll make sure to give you my card so that I can get that information from you.
The people that develop the codes and standards, when they develop these codes and standards, take all of that into consideration when they set up the code and standard for the design of these systems.
That's great.
So,
there's lots of experts out there and lots of drug companies that have done all kinds of studies and turned out the experts were wrong. So I'm going to make sure that you make call. I'd like to have that
thank you.
as soon as possible. I think just for your own awareness and knowing that you're going forward in a positive way, that would be good.
He has some information on the explosive hazards of hydrogen that I hope we can get to at some point. How many slides beyond is that? Should we jump to it, or?
I don't know what you're talking about, actually.
You don't have the.
Oh, no, I have this slide, but it's not in this.
Oh, it's not in this presentation? Okay.
That shows the 2 cars.
Yeah. Well, I think you can compare a car powered by hydrogen to a car.
That's not the question he was asking.
Yeah.
He was asking, you know, if all this stuff just blows up, what's the blast?
At the electrolyzer, you mean? Is that what you're
Well, in the storage.
Storage. Talking about the hydrogen tanks all together.
You mean on the trucks?
I'm talking about at PGV especially. On site of the earthquake center.
Okay.
A couple things. First off, hydrogen does mostly go up, so that's one good mitigating factor for it compared to gasoline recycling. Okay, so it actually usually explodes and goes in the way you want it to go. Generally speaking, I would imagine you could get a rough idea, just calculate in joules, you know, the quantity of material there, and just the energy, density, and you can come out with this rough energy in joules. Should give us some kind of possible idea of the blast radius per the vector. You know, what we imagine.
Well, NASA has done extensive documentation of the blast qualities of hydrogen. So there's a lot of documentation out there, but it's not something that I focused on, mainly because, you know, the hydrogen is contained in these high pressure cylinders, which are extensively tested. I mean, they're dropped from 120 feet, they're cooked in a fire, they have had bullets fired at them, they've had impact tests. There's a whole variety of tests. The other thing is you've compartmentalized your gas. It's not all one great big huge cylinder, you've got individual cylinders. So you have to look at what's the probability that all of those cylinders would actually quote, blow up at the same time. They all have overpressure devices on them. So each cylinder has its own relief valve, so that if it gets overpressured, the valve will lift and the hydrogen will be diverted away through a vent to dissipate in the atmosphere.
I get all that, but an earthquake is like a wild card.
or a volcanic event which would melt it with magma or whatever.
It's just been like 3 or 4 years.
Of course, I mean, think of a car full of gasoline in a volcanic event. Or if someone, say, has a match, or someone's tank is rusty, or they're smoking while they're filming. Think of that. Can you compare a tank full of gas with a hydrogen cylinder? Is there anything in comparison?
We're talking about multiple hydrogen cylinders all at one
I think
place.
there's about
12.
Okay, 12 cars.
I'm not an alarmist, just so you know.
12 cars together in a parking lot
But
with gas.
the thing is that this is all taken into consideration in the design and the codes and standards development. There's extensive research and development. They don't just put this stuff out in the public without having done these kinds of studies. And we're following those codes and
In
standards.
case thalidomide for women for nausea and failure, so all those kind of errors can happen. So that's why I'm raising the question.
Okay.
It's very valuable to check out in the first place.
What kind of storage capacity are we talking? Obviously, you have projections for the future. If this is successful and you want to, and there's going to be a plant to produce so that we can use it in vehicles, what's the max storage capacity you're talking about?
Well, where?
Wherever your plant's going to be.
Well, I'm not planning a plant. So this is strictly an experiment. As I said, we want to see what happens to the electrolyzer when it's used. Kind of
It's a 2-year experiment.
Well, my money runs out in 2 years. Obviously, I'm hoping I'll be able to get some more money so we can run it enough so over time, because I'm not sure, I don't know how fast it would degrade, and you'll have to see. So I'm hoping I'll get some more money, which is always tough to get. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Yes, this is a general question. With this is being a test project, and you've chosen PGV as your site,
right.
What other test sites have you looked at other than PGV before deciding on PGV?
Well, there was a reason we chose PGV. First of all, we're servicing, our buses are being operated by the Volcano Park. So they're our customer, quote customer. And also, we needed somebody to operate our own bus, which was MTA. They stepped up to the plate to do it.
Okay.
So, if you look at PGV, it's pretty ideally located between those two customer sites.
Not really if you look at the carbon footprint. If you look at the carbon footprint.
Well, I'm not actually looking at the carbon footprint. I'm just doing an experiment on making the hydrogen. This is not commercial. This is not commercial.
It's, with it being an experiment, you would think that you would take the most direct approach to where you can get to where you need to instead of spreading it out where you can cause, nothing's going to cause any damage at all, but that it would be more cost effective because each time they've got to drive up the hill and down the hill and over.
Yeah, I don't like that, but for the sake of this project, that's acceptable. Ideally, you want to have your hydrogen production facility right beside your bus depots.
Why aren't you doing it?
Well, because this is just an experiment, and I would have to buy. If I put my hydrogen production system at MTA,
you can buy kits.
I'd have to buy, my electricity from Helco, and it would be basically a fossil fuel derived electricity, and I'd have to pay for the sake of this argument. For this project, that doesn't make sense. I'd have to put in another facility up at Hawaii Volcanoes Park, and once again, I'd have to plug into the grid to be able to get that electricity. So that's tens of millions of dollars.
What about the wind farm?
Well, that's down in South Point. Yeah, but I only have a little tiny project. It's taken me 4 years to get all this money pulled together, and I can barely make it on what I have. And And so what we're doing is getting data, so some guy with deep pockets who really wants to do this in the future will have some information upon which to make a business decision of what he wants to do. Well, there's not necessarily PG.
So we're into the questions and answers now, because I
No,
got some.
actually, I've still got a few more.
Well, I don't want to run out of time because I've been waiting and
We've
I got
got another
questions.
hour. I don't want to.
I just
Will you
I
just
want
let
to
me
have a
finish
chance.
my presentation?
Oh yeah, I just
Thank you.
everybody's asking questions. I just wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you said you wanted to be
I
last.
do. I want to be last.
Good.
But I want to
Okay,
get a
let me
chance
just
to say
carry
something.
on with the safety stuff. So I want to make a point. These systems are not going to be operated by university personnel, so that should give you a bit of comfort. Postdocs and students are not going to be operating this. We're actually hiring a professional company that has extensive experience in hydrogen systems to both maintain and operate and deliver the hydrogen between the various sites. There'll be a lot of training. I've got a lot of money to provide for training because this, from our point of view, we want to keep this, obviously, keep the project safe. Including, we're doing first responders, hands-on first responders training here and over on Oahu. We're bringing a team from Pacific Northwest National Lab. They actually have what they call a prop, where they have a car and they can simulate hydrogen fires. So the first responders get like 4 hours of classroom time when they actually go out to the training field, get the hoses out, and they start, fighting these fires and knowing where to clip the electrical cables, the whole 9 yards for the training. And we plan to have them here for a whole week, so we can run various shifts through so that we can get them all done. And we're doing the same over in Oahu. So that's part of what we're doing. And we're working with the Hawaii Fire Council, which is the organization of all the fire chiefs from the various islands. In fact, your last fire chief is actually working for them now, that is retired, and he's taking the lead on organizing this training. So, and they're very enthusiastic about this part of the project. Okay, a few more some more information. Just looking at the DOE program on itself, the DOE is not Department of Education, Department of Energy. There's 183 vehicles on the mainland that are being tested, doing technology validation. There's 25 fueling stations, and many of them are inside cities, inside an urban setting. They have over 33,000 fueling events, and 151,000 kilograms of hydrogen has been fueled since this program started. So a little bit of data. And this is my last slide. And then we can have a whole hour of questions. So I just wanted to do a project summary again and just remind you, because you've heard all this detailed stuff, about what we're doing. We're making hydrogen at PGV. We're putting it in the trailers. We're hauling it to MTA, Hele bus service, where we'll be fueling this bus, which will provide a feeder service to the main bus line. We'll also be supplying Volcano National Park at the Kilauea military campsite. And they will have 2 buses, which will be used to transport park visitors around the park. And that's my presentation. And now, Bob.
Sorry. Some housekeeping stuff here first, because everybody may not be able to stick around for the entire question and answer session. You're all hopefully got a comment sheet here. You can turn them in tonight. You can email them or mail them to the addresses that are on here. If you turn them in tonight, please give them to me just so I make sure that I have them. And the comment period ends on November 7th. So have it postmarked or in the email by that date. After that point, we're going to consider all the comments. Anybody who gives a comment will get it. Pardon me?
Midnight that day?
Yeah, midnight's good. Yeah, call me up. Yeah. We're going to consider all the comments that are in there and make detailed responses to them. And, you know, there could be project changes, there could be, you know, there could be differences, there could be additions to the EA. This is why we have this process. I appreciate what I've heard so far tonight. There's really a lot of good questions and suggestions out there. And I just wanted to make clear to folks, some people are asking about what permits are necessary. You know, there aren't really a whole lot of permits necessary for a very small research project like this. Basically, the reason we're doing EA is because it's using state funding. So it's under Chapter 343, we do an EA. There is a process during the EA, as part of the EA process, where you can challenge the adequacy of a decision made by an agency. You can challenge a FONSI. That happens after the agency issues its decision about whether to do a FONSI, whether it's a finding of no significant impact, or prepare an EIS. You as a citizen, as a resident of the state of Hawaii, you have an ability to do that. So that's a 30-day period after that's issued. So that's a recourse that some people have been asking about. Because they're asking what kind of permit, even conservation district? No, no conservation district use permit. Special management area? No, it's not a special management area. But there is a very good recourse for that to take place. So, and as we do the questions tonight, I'd like to have, first of all, those people who haven't said anything yet, who haven't asked a question yet, I'd like you guys to raise your hands. And then we'll get around, you already said something. And then we'll get around.
But nobody was here. That was a private conversation. I got some stuff I want.
No, but you and I talked about this.
Okay.
I said I would like, you know, I don't think it's going to last too long. And what time do you have to leave?
I just want to have the discussion because there's some things I want everybody here to hear.
That's good. And,
before they have to.
Okay. Well, I don't think it's going to last too
especially
long.
Mike.
Why don't we get to you after we get to the people who haven't had a chance to say anything? And I appreciate you forbearing during the thing. Yeah. Excellent, sir.
Yes, I think most of the people in this room are here because we're concerned about the industrialization of Puna. And the fact things are being put in residential neighborhoods. And here's a big question, a simple one. Do you think that PGV, out of the goodness of their heart, is giving you this money? Is PGV, out of the goodness of their heart, is giving you this money? Because we in this community realize that that is not the case. We realize that PGV wants to then put a plant down there to produce hydrogen in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And not only is that hydrogen going to be there, you have so many thousand gallons of pentane right next to it that most of the people in the community don't realize are there yet. And then you have, on the volcano, you have all this problem on the volcano with all the seismic activity that can happen. This is all about making money for PGV and keeping so that they can make more money. We know that. They're not giving you something for nothing. And if anybody in this room believes that, you know, I got a bridge.
Well, we have a representative of PGV tonight. Yeah. This is our meeting, and he is by no means obligated to do this. This is not his meeting. He's not running. He's nice enough to come here and hear you. If he wants to speak about this, you know, he's welcome to speak. If he doesn't, you know, that's another issue. This project is not a PGV. I realize, you know, there are issues because it is in the PGV area. If anybody gets any information about hydrogen, it can be used anywhere in the world. And Mitch isn't the only person working on hydrogen in the world.
I think what you're doing is good. I'm not disagreeing
I just
with that.
want to let
I'm
you
saying
know
the ulterior motives of this whole thing is the grand governor and his push for geothermal, and this gentleman here wanting to make more money in this plant.
Okay, well, I think Mike said he's willing to speak.
I'd be happy to give our position. So, you know, we're trying to help the state, we kind of help the county. We spend $1 billion a year on importing petroleum fuel. This is a potential, this project is a way to look at trying to reduce our dependency on imported oil. We have no plans to industrialize our location. We think this is a fantastic.
I don't believe you, I'm sorry. Nobody in this room believes you that I know of. I'm sorry, I just can't believe that. I've heard all half-truths from you guys, Dr. Thomas, you, big, what's this called, Richard Ha, and I've heard all this stuff. So I don't believe that at all.
Okay, and I respect your belief. Yeah. Please respect mine.
Why don't you speak to the side, though, that is about what does it do for PGV? Maybe some part of it really is is that you're wanting to somehow help out the bigger community? Because otherwise people are going to feel like you're just speaking the half truth.
No.
What does it do for PGV? Selfishly, what does it do for you? What's that other half?
It shows that we're helping out, looking at alternative methods to reduce our dependency.
Just reduce it. That's the good side of community. What's it do just for PG&V? Just talk about that. Otherwise, you're not being truthful about your side and your own selfish interest.
We're helping out.
Okay. No, that's the
Come
community.
on,
What's your own underlying motive for yourselves?
Make money.
Well, who knows where it's going to go?
I mean, that's like you gain respect is when you speak really to the side.
Yeah, who knows where it's going to go? One day, people's minds may change, and you know, they may see things in a different light and say, look, perhaps we should consider using more geothermal to reduce our dependency on transportation. That's what PGV is about. But we don't have any plans to industrialize it.
Part of what I wanted to say was on PGV, so I'd like to do that part.
It wouldn't feed suspicion.
Let me just get okay, we have had some people who have gotten a chance to talk, and actually some two people up back here who have.
Yeah, you know, Mitch was giving his presentation. He's an academic person at the university. What do I know about Geometric Associates? For example, is Geometric Associates, is any of their clients, are they PGV or ORMAP?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely, and Rob knows that for sure. And that's for a project on Maui.
Okay.
They also consult for PGV here.
No.
They were in the conference the other day. They were in the conference. I had a conference.
No.
Geometric Assessment.
Rob, I am geometrician. If I wasn't there, I wasn't in the geometrician wasn't in
There
the
were
conference.
two drilling
There
experts.
are people here who do know who I am.
There were two drilling experts from Geometric Associates.
That's
Geothermal.
Yeah.
Geothermal. I'm sorry. Okay, Geothermal.
Yeah.
But they might have a similar name to my company. They're not my company.
My apologies.
John?
I got my list. To begin with, can you tell me what your setback is from the community? The distance from where you're planning your installation to the boundary?
I'm not familiar with,
John, you familiar where the fish ponds are?
sure.
If you head towards the plant, it's right across the street from those fish ponds. So I would say it's, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 feet, maybe roughly.
So Oiki Road or Kapoho Road? What's the distance between the setback from Oiki or Kapoho?
Oiki is much further away because it's on the other side
Yeah.
of the property, but it's closer to Kapoho Road. When you drive into Kapoho Road, there's the fish ponds on the left.
Right.
Continue on up just before you get to the hill that goes up. It's right there.
Inside the gate. Inside the gate.
Just past the guard shack.
Just by the guard shack.
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
And the
my
plant's on the other side of the hill.
Yeah, my next question is regard to the DB level of the machinery you're going to operate.
I can't give you an accurate number on that, but when we were originally going to put a hydrogen production station up at Habo, up at the volcano park, and of course they're very conscious of noise levels, and so they gave us a noise level target of 38 dB at I think it was 100 meters from the nearest habitation, and we more than met that. Now, I want to qualify that. That was a different compressor and a different system, but essentially they're inside a container, which is a first line of defense, as you were against propagating an acoustic noise, but they're essentially pretty quiet. The electrolyzer itself doesn't make any noise. You get some fan noise from those air exchangers, kind of like your, maybe a little bit more than a house air conditioning system.
Like the fan noises from the geothermal?
No, they're nowhere near that size. I mean, they're tiny. They're like that size. So the best answer I can give you right now is we haven't actually done a noise, because we haven't run the plant yet. We don't even know what it is. But just to give you, an idea, is that's what we measured on our plant that we have in downtown Honolulu. Actually, it was really hard to get the measurements because there's so much other noise out there. We had to do it like 3 o'clock in the morning.
I think probably a more concern to us is that you have for mitigation if it proves to be a problem.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's several things you can do to mitigate it. You can put up concrete walls around it and you can also put cladding, around the container itself.
Moving on to the issue of the buses.
Yes.
And the fueling. One of those buses, as I have it in my brain, was paid for from the community asset funds money of the county.
No. The two buses at Volcano Park, in fact, I helped them write their proposal. That's federal FTA money. They got a $1 million grant. And then the hydrogen fund, which the legislature set up about 4 years ago. They didn't have enough money to buy the buses and do the conversion, so the hydrogen fund kicked in. It was $300,000 to support them. And of course, they got some leverage then because the Air Force picked up the cost of doing the first bus. The Hilo bus is being paid for out of the barrel tax money that the legislature put in place, and HNEI is a recipient of part of the barrel tax money. So it's basically state money. It's buying the bus and paying for the conversion. And the idea there is it's for the public good. That's one, and demonstrating new technology, for the general public, and the public gets a benefit out of that, rather than some airy-fairy research project that may or may not be useful. So that's kind of the rationale.
When you talk about barrel tax, are you talking about fuel tax revenue?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about for every barrel of oil that's imported into Hawaii, $1.05 has been allocated to a barrel tax fund. That's what they call it, the barrel tax. 60% of that goes to the legislature general fund. They just took it. And I'm not sure the percentage goes to DBED, the energy office, and then HNEI gets, I think we get about 15% of that barrel tax money. It works out to about $2.5 to $3 million a year, and we use that. Many of our projects require cost share. We get federal funds, but they always have the hook on it that we have to provide, a certain percentage of cost share, and we use that to leverage federal funding. So we've leveraged a lot of federal funds in this particular project, and although I didn't need cost share, we needed some money to pay for the bus because we didn't have enough. So
well, just an observation. I think it's very unfortunate that your project has been tied to PGV.
Yes.
Yep.
Concur.
I think that this has done nothing for your credibility, and will do nothing for your credibility. We have a quarter-century history with geothermal here, and none of it's good. It has been predatory, and that's a kindness. The expression is, you know what you get when you eat crackers in bed? You end up sleeping with crumbs. And unfortunately, my friends, you got a whole lot of crumbs in your bed at the moment. I'm sorry for it.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that they've stepped up to the plate to help my project and help us do something good for the citizens of Hawaii.
Well, they've done nothing. They've done nothing for the thousands of us in Puna.
Well, hopefully
the list of promises that these people have made, jobs, free electricity, it goes on and on and on. All of it is a lie. And now you've tied your wagon to it, and you will eventually get drugged down with them.
I'm hoping that the information that we develop out of this project will be for the good of all of Hawaii, so we can use more renewables and displace fossil fuels. So,
Julie and the woman back here, you folks, Rob is insisting that the grader be able to talk now. I'm going to ask you if it's okay that you defer to his need to talk at this
I
point.
just have a short question.
yeah. Okay.
Thanks. First, thank you for presenting for us. You were talking about how hard it is to obtain money,
Yes.
and that the fact that PGV has come forward to offer you free electricity. I'd like to know if you offered HELCO the opportunity to serve the
way back when, and we couldn't get it for free. They were.
Consider asking them again.
We do a lot of work with Helco, but I'm not planning to ask Helco because this is such a small project. I have not planned to do that. It's more than just the electricity, though. I think I said in my presentation that they have the infrastructure ready to go. You know, this big electric transformers, switches, all that stuff is incredibly expensive.
I find it hard to believe that Helco doesn't have transformers and electricity and
They have probably a mountain of them, but not necessarily in a spot where I can use them. This was ready to go, and you know that's why.
Helco Engineering is about 3 blocks from the MTA.
Yeah, I know that. So anyway, that's why we made the decision.
Okay, 30
maybe
second
round
question,
2
and then we're ready.
of this project, when we get some useful data, perhaps Helco will want to participate and supply us with electricity. What?
And then it would be too late for us to
Well, this is just a research project. So we're not building a big industrial plant. And when we're finished our project, you know, this is not, I mean, the infrastructure we're putting in is not big enough to support an industrial size installation. We'll have to remove all our equipment and, you know, hammer up all the concrete pads and vacate the site. It's meant to be a finite time, and we will be out of it.
I just have a real quick statement. I'm really thankful, Mitch, for all of your effort and for you to come here and that you're really, I think this is going to be an excellent project to demonstrate how Hawaii Island can help us become less dependent on fossil fuels. I have a question though, and maybe this is for you, Ron. The feeder buses, where are they going to go? Are they at the whim of the county? Is it already figured out? What's the benefit?
I wish it was a question for me.
It's actually a question for me.
Okay.
In discussions with Tom Brown, and what way we wanted to pose the project was to have that bus dedicated to the Puna district, so that we could support Puna, so they'd get a benefit, it'd be a benefit to the local residents for supporting this kind of project. So, for example, your kids that have to walk miles and miles to get to the main bus line, here's a bus that could be used to transport them to the bus in the morning and back home after school. So, yes.
And I had a question about the engines. Will they be about the same power as a diesel engine? Relevant to like horsepower?
Yes, they will, because you know you have this mass that has to be moved along at a certain speed, be able to go up hills and all that. So basically, your power plant is roughly equivalent from the point of view of the power required. You know, things that make it a bit variable are the overall weight. So, for example, a diesel engine is pretty heavy because you've got this big block of iron, whereas you know a fuel cell is much smaller and it's not made of metal. It's it's made of other components. So, but that's just tuning it up. But essentially, you need horsepower to maintain speed and go up hills.
So it's about equivalent.
Yeah, you can equivalent.
Okay, so a lot of people weren't here. We came in early and we discussed a lot of stuff with Ron and Mitch, and they were very accommodating, and we had a half an hour discussion, and part of the things that we talked about was how the community where they're going to put this feels about it, and I think it's been expressed here. I think you now can see that what I was talking about, and that we felt it's inappropriate to put more industrial uses into a residential community, and so I have some stuff from Mike, and also on these electrical equipment and transformers and all that. Helco has a substation in Keaau Industrial Park, and so I think that you may know more about it than I do, but I think the impact, you're bypassing the impact here, and I wish you could just kind of open your eyes a little bit and see what we're talking about, and maybe try to be a little more flexible in your position here, and considering the impacts to this community that we already experienced from PGV. So so Mike, you guys are talking about you just want to help, get off fossil fuels and all that. you guys have been there for a long time, and we don't have, you haven't helped us as far as the monitoring that works. And I've been complaining about this for 20 years, bro. You're not the first guy I talked to. I went through this, and I went through this, and I went through this, and you thought you guys fixed it. Well, we just gave up because Department of Health wouldn't help us. You never fixed it. Nobody would listen to us. Nobody would help us. We sued you how many times? And so now we're back. The monitoring is still a problem. So if you really want to help, why don't you fix the monitoring after 20 years, bro? So we're not smelling it in the community and you're telling us the monitor is reading 0, because that ain't happening. So you can give him $750,000. We really think that you want to build a big. Your bottom line. I read your financials. I know you getting $200 million in grants from the federal government. I read $200 million in grants. Hundreds of millions in TARP funds and loan guarantees. These are huge. I mean, it's not just this little PGV. This is ORMAT. And so, you could do these things to take care of the community. If you really wanted to be a good neighbor, I asked you for the monitoring data. For months, August 15th, they had leaks. I asked for the data. Promise me again tonight, but I never got it. And I like Mike. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I swear, I really do like you, but I'm not going to pull punches here on what's going on and what we see. And I think you're feeding into this, Mitch. I hate to, because I told you too. I love hydrogen. I want to do hydrogen, but and I think the whole community now wants to do hydrogen, but we don't want. So but you putting us in a position, adversarial position, because you didn't come and talk to us. Now you already made this plan, and you're already telling the board whatever. You got a FONSI, no notable impacts, but they're going to produce more power. They're going to run them through the generator. They're going to make more nodes. There are going to be more impacts to this community from this project. And we do think that you guys are going to have to make an industrial zone there, because they're talking about all these other industries. And I understand you guys want to feed the power. You want to bypass Halco. All right, so this is the thing. And you want to equalize the grid. So you want to feed the power. You want to buy. But that you're creating an industrial area right in the middle of our homes. And like I was telling you, we got a sustainable community. We are on solar. We're off the grid. We grow our own food. We already do everything the state and all you guys say you want to do, and you're going to destroy that because you're going to come in there and you're going to build these industries and you're going to destroy the model. And so, I'll stop there for now, but I got a couple more things to say.
Bruce, okay, let's see. You had your hand up a minute ago. Did you want to say something? You didn't raise my hand? Actually, I'll pass. You was first.
A very simple question well, actually, I have two questions, both for Mike. One is why is there excess power to produce when we're told that geothermal is the best base load power? Why is there power to produce? And the second is a question of, is PGV permitted to be an electricity provider? Direct electricity provider.
The first question, which was, what did you say?
Well, I can't understand why at nighttime. I'm told it's a base load power issue.
Okay. The Halco grid has a peak load of 180 megawatts. At night, when demand goes down, that demand goes down as low as 90 megawatts. So we, along with the rest of all the power plants on the island, are reduced. That's just part of.
So you're not needed to provide base load power then?
Well, we have a base load. Our contract is for 38 megawatts, and the base load portion is 30 and 22 at night. The rest is at Halco's discretion, along with, like I said, the rest of all the power plants producers on the island. They have to contribute to the reduction also. And then the second one was
permitted to be a direct utility provider.
We are not permitted. We only have one customer in this company.
Well, it looks like we're also doing research with electrical power.
We're not selling, so we're not, that's part of the deal. If we were to sell, we would be, that would, yeah, we couldn't do that. We're not allowed to sell.
So does that mean that you're going to use the electricity that's available at night to provide the electricity for this project?
The amount of electricity that this project uses is 65 kilowatts, which is probably a medium-sized motor. And we typically have excess power, and that's the plan.
65 kilowatts continuous or what?
Continuous at full load, but like I think they said, we're not going to be at full load continuous, but that's the.
So have you estimated the total amount per day in gigawatts? Or what?
We haven't actually put our research plan together of how we're going to load and unload the electrolyzer. That's the PhDs are going to do that. So.
Okay, Bob, you've been very patient. I'm going to call on your progress. Mitch.
Yes, sir.
You're an educator.
Actually, I'm not.
You're not.
I came from private industry. 10 years ago, my phone rang and said, hey, we want to set up a hydrogen program in Hawaii. Would you be interested? And I said, yes. I'm not. I came out of business, and it was very hard, actually, working in a university. So for me, but now they see some value in me. But no, I'm not an educator.
You're yeah, that's right. You're working in the ivory tower.
Yes.
Mitch, I hope you understand, because you've been a very pleasant presenter tonight.
Thank you.
It's enjoyable to be with you and learn about this.
Thank you.
And it's too bad that you're being put into this situation. I don't think you're getting it. It's not you, it's not your project. It's that you picked to do business with what is a very bad neighbor. And they know it. Mike's hearing nothing new because he's been to hearings in the last month where they've been 100% anti-Mormon. He brings his lawyer with him because the lawyer knows what a bad neighbor they are. And you, unfortunately, they didn't tell you when you went to them that we're a bad neighbor, it's going to hurt you. But that is what's happening here tonight. So, Mitch, you said you've got that 1 acre there, and probably you're not going to produce any noise outside that acre. There won't be any noise.
That's correct.
Yeah. And if there was, you're going to mitigate it by putting up a concrete wall or something so no noise will come outside that acre.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. So you're going to be 100% contained on site.
I believe, well, inside the bounds of...
Right, that's what I'm saying. You're going to be completely within the boundaries of that site.
Right.
And I commend you for that. That's a good neighbor.
Thank you.
Mike, you came to the county council meeting last week. And you two, I like to mention you're very, it's work for Orange.
It's hard to tell, but.
But Mike, you came to the council meeting, you came without the legal digger. You would never tell. I said, where's Tom? And you said, well, if I need him, he'll be here, but he's not here. And you perform so much better when Tom is in with you. Don't take that personally. You know how lawyers screw things up. That's why our Congress is rated at 15%, because they're mostly lawyers. But Mike, you talked to the county council. You made a presentation. You were sitting right behind me. And you went up and you talked to the county council. And I liked what you said. I heard what you said. I came back and I said, Mike, that was great. Will you tell us tonight, Mike? You said to the county council, we can do better. Where's John over? You up? Oh, okay. John! You said you can do better. You can be a better neighbor. There are things we can do so we don't have the impact, like he's doing. He's not going to have an impact. Mike, will you tell us tonight, because I'm sure you've talked with Ormac, will you tell us tonight, right here, right now, what specifically you're going to do to reduce those impacts or eliminate those impacts to the community? And when are you going to do it? And how are you going to do it? Can you tell us that tonight?
Which impacts are you referring to?
Oh my God.
What I spoke at the county council?
You spoke at the county council.
About drilling?
Yeah. You said Well, I'd like to have Mike, I mean, I want
Paul Thompson's the guy, we talked to him, he's gonna produce a list of stuff tomorrow.
Yeah, and
You mean Tuesday night at Pahoa?
No, I mean tomorrow,
Where tomorrow?
at Dominic Ugon's office.
Oh, you're going to the DNR meeting?
No, I went to the DLNR meeting, and out of that meeting came a promise from Paul Thompson to mitigate the noise and the drilling, and they're gonna produce their promises in writing tomorrow.
Okay, I'll withdraw, Mike, I'm gonna withdraw the question, because I didn't know that this
This just happened.
Okay.
Sorry, I just found out hours ago.
and just
Maybe
so
Mike
you,
knows more about
I
it.
do.
Okay.
We sent the information to Dominic today.
Oh, today,
So you could probably
the
check.
promises.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us tonight, Mike, or not?
Yeah, after problems. We have
We'd love to hear it.
I'd love to explain it. We have a workover coming up in November. Workover of a well. We have to replace a liner. So we're gonna bring in a rig. And we've talked to the it's not gonna be our rig, it's a smaller rig. And we've talked to the contractor. The company's name is Water Resource International. They drill water wells throughout the state. They're very familiar with noise mitigation.
I think the ones who did the work closure of the Geothermal?
They did provide the folks for that one, yes. And they've drilled several wells in the Puna district also. So they're familiar with noise mitigation, so they're coming over, they're gonna be bringing along noise insulation blankets. They're gonna also use a muffler that we have on location, because the loudest generator of noise on that rig is their motor. So we do have a muffler that's going to be on there, and the information was sent to Dominic Bob. So you can look it up on the internet, what the specs are, how much noise it can reduce the noise by. And whatever else, we have insulation blankets. It's similar to insulation that you have in homes, but it's industrial use. So those are the primary measures that we're going to incorporate on this next drilling project.
I know something about this, so I'd like to kind of chime in here.
Yeah, it's the tail sort of wagging the dog in this meeting, but it seems to be very productive for the folks that are here. So unless there's somebody who wants to say something directly about our project and interrupt this, why don't we just keep this going? Are you okay with that, Mike?
This should be done pretty quickly, I think. So on the noise mitigation, the blankets and the walls and all that, that's not going to get rid of the You got to have balance generated. I mean, you understand that, right? You know the difference between having your equipment balanced, and that's where the costs come in. And are you going to balance the equipment? Because you're going to mitigate some of it, but the real problem is that those generators need to be balanced so you don't get that.
Yeah, this rig is like a truck mounted rig, so it's not huge like the one we use.
But you understand what I'm saying. I want you to know that we understand the difference between balance and also the difference in the size of the reason. That's all I got to say.
Ron, I haven't finished. I was interrupted.
Sorry, Bob.
Okay.
How does it feel?
There are other people with their hands up, but go ahead.
Okay, Mike, I'd like to just follow up on that too. Why did it take 20 years for format to get ready? He wouldn't be here. He would be head of this project going forward if it wasn't for the contractor of Warner.
He's a late bloomer.
Let me just move on to one thing that goes to Mitch. Mitch, your comment sheet, or whose comment sheet is this? Okay, Ron's comment sheet. I think Mitch is going to answer the question. It says in here that the purpose of doing this is not for base power generation, which is what Ormat is. That's base power. That's the best power. What they're producing is the best power. It's the best replacement for oil generation that we're doing now, because it's base power. And your project is for variable, it says right here, I'm reading. Yeah. I mean, I knew this, but you wrote it down. It says for variable wind and solar. Mitch, if you want this project to do the study that you're looking for, which is solar and wind, we have that on this island, which we talked about before the meeting started. If you want this project to go forward, unless they become a real good neighbor real fast, I'm hearing some good trends here, but unless they do that, why do you want to stymie your project going to Ormat when you could go do the complete study at the either one of the winds at the end of the island. I realize it's a little distance away, but then you're studying what you want to study. The fluctuation, because that's intermittent power. This is base load, that's intermittent. So why don't you go there, and again, we have a caveat on that, I understand, but really do the complete study, because you're going to have to vary his pilot. He's giving you base load. You're going to have to vary it. Here you're going to get the real true variation from wind, and we really don't have any solar available on the island that you could use, so it boils down to wind. So that's my question. Better study, no problem with a bad neighbor, it might be getting better. You're on your way. Let me ask you that. I have a finite period of time to do this project because, you know, people cost money. You know, the clock just ticks. I need to put as many hours on that electrolyzer as possible, and your wind turbines only operate 45 to 30% of the time. So it would take me 3 times longer to get the same degree of performance on that electrolyzer if I went to a wind farm. I need, it's just like, what do they call it? Accelerated testing. So that's a huge advantage. Now, once we do that, hey, I'm not saying that we wouldn't go to a wind farm.
Sort of a beta site. You're sort of doing alpha research.
Yeah, this is total.
Right now.
This is fundamental research.
Well,
not
control
not
the
fundamental, but
variability, not
it's
just respond to it.
applied research. You know, we're trying to find out if those salesmen that come in and say, "Hey, don't worry, my electrolyzer will run like this for 5 years with no, you know, degradation." Well, you know what salesmen are like, so we want to make sure and test this out.
Is that UTC?
These electrolyzers come from that company called Proton. I showed you a picture of it. They're out of Connecticut.
American made?
Yes.
Corey?
Yeah, there's some military funding in this. It's from Naval Research Laboratory, $1.8 million in funding for the military. Of course, it's very interested
Sorry,
in.
I'm not going to answer it. I just want to turn it off. I'm not going to be rude.
Anyway, so there's military funding in this. So I wonder what their participation is and what their future plans are.
Let me explain the military funding. The money, the big chunk of money came from the U.S. DOE, but because of contractual and the end of the year fund, I mean, you got to understand I won't try to even explain it. The funding cycles, if you don't spend it, you lose it. So they're coming up to the end of their funding cycle, and they had to get the money out, and so they ran it through Naval Research Lab, which basically was, you know, provided an administrative function, but they didn't put any of their own money into it. They gave us the contract went through them to us, and they're managed, but they manage the contract. So I report to an NRL lady, who's my program manager, but they didn't put any money in. Office of Naval Research put some money in to help. We do a lot of work with Office of Naval Research to help buy some additional trailers, because my project only could afford one single trailer, so it wouldn't have been practical to have, you know, your trailer sitting over at MTA or up at Havo and nothing to fill. So I would have been, you know, so I need a minimum of 3 trailers, 2 at the sites dispensing, and then 1 being filled, and then you swap them out. So the Navy did that.
This gentleman has been waiting a long time. I forgot about it. I just want to say that also, if you want your comments responded to, be sure to put an email address or an address, and it'd be nice to put a name on there too, so I can respond to it. Otherwise, they'll be reproduced in the final EA. But if you want them responded to, give me some contact.
And Ron and Mitch, thank you for coming and giving the presentation.
You're very welcome.
My biggest question is about the first response and the team that would be coming with their car, whether it would be on this island or another island, testing out the fires on how things would happen. The one thing that we do know on this island, that first response on this island is very, very slow. So by the time that the first response has gotten there, the car would have blown up, been on fire, or something would have happened. So how do you plan to counteract that?
I'm not that familiar with the layout, but at Havo, the fire station is across the parking lot. You know, it's located at KMC, so it's very close. And that.
What about down here?
And those buses. I'm not familiar with the locations of the actual fire stations here.
Central Fire
5
Station.
miles.
It's actually more like 7 miles.
Yeah.
I live in that area. I can't get insurance, fire insurance, because I'm like half a mile too far from the fire station.
But obviously, the ones that are closest and will be, wherever that bus is going to operate,
Yeah, my question
will
is
have
like,
the priority.
it's like a bus that goes down into one of the lower subdivisions,
Yeah.
and then something happens, and first responders are called, or people that have been trained for first response are not totally trained in first response. And they get there and they don't know what to do, how to get anything done, and then there's a big fire which hooks on to any of the other forests that are sitting there and starts burning other stuff down. How do you
Our
counteract
plan
that?
is to, like I said, they're going to be here for a week. Our plan is to train them all. Because, we're not planning necessarily to train the guys over in Puna.
You should train them all around the island, because the buses will soon run all around the islands, and they all should need to know.
At that point, we can bring these guys back, and it's going to be open to everybody.
But that may be too late.
The fire council is organizing the training, but obviously we want the people that have a high probability of fighting any kind of a fire to be the guys that get the training. So and they're here for a week, and we can extend that. It can be longer.
Mitch, I think
the big expense is bringing these guys over here, shipping all their equipment over here. So it's a pretty big, piece of equipment that they're shipping over here. So
you took the slide out, so unfortunately we didn't get to see it, but I kind of wish you kept it in. I know you had to reduce it, but a hydrogen vehicle fire is extremely much smaller than a gas. It is extremely.
I just have, let me just explain. I have this slide, okay, and it shows two cars, exactly the same car. One, they have a hydrogen fire, and one is a gasoline fire. And so they're both ignited at the same time, remotely. And the hydrogen fire is a plume about this wide that goes straight up. It's like an antenna. And of course the gasoline fire is there on the ground and stays there. Within a minute, I think it's a minute, the hydrogen fire is out. It's burned itself out.
Okay, but what about a collision?
Let me just finish this. Whereas the gasoline fire is just getting going, and it's the whole thing burns. But the hydrogen car is doesn't look like anything happened to it. So it's a really convincing slide of hydrogen safety. But for this session, I can always bring it back at a follow-on session if you guys are interested in it. It's a pretty powerful slide. So I just want to add one other comment about hydrogen fires. Hydrogen fires, the product of combustion is water because it's mixing with the air, oxygen in the air. You don't get carbon, so you don't get a lot of heat trapped in that. So you can be about this far away from a hydrogen fire and you don't feel the heat. So it's not going to cause other things that are, 2 or 3 feet away to catch on fire because it doesn't radiate a lot of heat.
Okay, the other part of my question is, I'm sorry, is that if you have a hydrogen fire and you have pentane leaking, or isopentane,
in a car?
No, he got it talking about
just out of sight. I'm not even talking PGV. Let's just say it's somewhere else and that's happening. What do you do? First responders are not going to be able to contain that in any way, shape, or form right away because once pentane gets ignited, it's going to just go.
I don't know anything about pentane fires, but let me tell you about hydrogen. So the way you fight a hydrogen fire is you let it burn itself out. And all these systems have like rupture discs on them. So like if you have a side impact, something like that, that rupture disc goes, and there's a vent line that leads up to take the hydrogen out. Now these tanks are really thick. I mean they're an aluminum liner with great big thick wraps of carbon fiber around, and these things are solid. And, you know, they fire bullets at them, they drop them from great heights, they drag them on the road, and these things are like virtually indestructible. If they do fail, it's like a graceful degradation. It's not like a metal tank that blows up and then you get fragmentation, like a bomb. It's not like that at all. It's just that those fibers kind of rupture and split a little bit, and the hydrogen can, you know, go out between the cracks. So, you know, it's not like a steel tank that would blow up and have fragments of steel. So they designed that all in. So, for example, on that tube trailer, each individual tank has a shutoff valve, has its own rupture disc, and is led to a, you know, a vent line. And you can isolate it in, you know, different sections. You can have, you know, 5 tanks on, you know, in sections. So you subdivide it, so you're reducing, once again, you're trying to reduce the amount of hydrogen that would become exposed to a fire.
Debbie, did you have a... Okay, I don't want to get to this guy because he...
So, you mentioned in answer to one of the questions, maybe in round 2. What are your plans for round 2 for this project?
Well, we need to analyze the results, and of course the US DOE is very interested in this project, and whether we stand up another phase at PGV or we go to another site at that time. Like if the results are good enough and DOE is, you know, being generous, then we can afford to go to another site. But right now, this is a very constrained, localized kind of a project. And we need to take the results from that, whatever they are, and look and see what the next step is. We haven't defined the next step.
And let's be clear, this EA is covering step 1. They do another one, it's another environmental documentation.
Good for you, Ron.
Yeah, I guess so. I hope we're retired. Go ahead.
So, I guess you have to go through the planning department. Are there any permits you need to get, or another opportunity for public input?
Ron, there's really no permit. It's a very, very small project. There's no need for a permit that I can see. You know, are you going to get a building permit? I don't know if you need it, but maybe.
Well, my contractor may have to get some permits for, you know, running some electrical lines, you know, that kind of thing.
Or maybe an electrical. I mean, they just basically haul the equipment on the site, load it up, plug it down, they can haul it away.
Don't you have to have permits to transport flammable gases?
Pardon?
Don't you need a permit to transport flammable gases?
Well, we're not, I mean,
DOT.
Yeah, DOT.
The DOT is certifying those tube trailers for use on public roads. The actual equipment coming in comes in a flat, but there's no hydrogen in it because it hasn't operated. So there would be no hydrogen in the equipment until it's delivered.
Well, that's what
when you take it off site, what you do is you empty, you know, basically take the hydrogen out. You have purging, you put an inert gas like nitrogen to flush out all the lines. And that's how you handle that.
You have to meet requirements to transport that, but it's not like it's not a permit. If they have all the requirements and certification.
You have the certification. I mean, the US DOE actually go to the manufacturer's site and they test the systems. And then, you know, then they give you a certificate saying that this is okay to use. So, for example, let me just, I want to address this because it's a good thing. When they made the tanks for these trailers, the manufacturer makes them in a batch. They actually make 2 or 3 extra tanks out of that batch, and they test those to destruction. They cycle them a gazillion times. They take them up to double their maximum allowable working pressure, and then they take it finally past all that until it eventually bursts. So that there's no kind of inherent flaw, you know, in the for example, the materials, the epoxies, or that kind of lot of carbon fiber that they use in that particular one.
So you feel really safe. You would ride
absolutely.
in a vehicle carrying that.
Yeah, sure. I would not, you know, if you think about your gasoline car, you got like 13 gallons of gasoline in a little tank with 16-inch, you know, sheet metal between you and, you know, your gasoline. and that's pretty explosive stuff.
I have another question.
Go
Do you
ahead.
mind if I
No, go
ask
ahead.
Mike a couple of questions? I have a couple of questions for Mike, and I'm going to ask you Andrew first. I've been looking into the water for gas. I don't know if you've heard that for a while. It's a system where I build a small electrolyzer and hook that up to the intake on my car, and it just supplements my gas with hydrogen. And you said that you've spent like $5.3 million so far researching what you're doing, which I think it's great to go to renewable fuels, but from what I've seen in all my free energy research, there's definitely ways to do, on-demand hydrogen, or ways to just have our electricity where we need it in more local spots, so that we don't have, huge corporations trying to set up systems. So I'm just wondering, have you done any on-demand hydrogen research?
No, I have not, but I want to address that, because there are a lot of these systems out there for under the hood hydrogen
I know it's totally different.
well, no, but I want to talk about that, about the safety side of that, to augment your gasoline supply. Now, if you bleed in oxygen into, hydrogen into like a gas, like natural gas or gasoline, there is a performance improvement in your engine, and I have friends who got patents on that kind of stuff, so that stuff actually does work. But the issue is when you're generating it on board your car, is a safety issue. So for example, I had a guy submit a request for some funding from us where he had a little electrolyzer on the hood of his car. He has water in there, and he's making hydrogen and oxygen in exactly the amount you need to support combustion. And you think about your car, it's got all these static electricity and all that. That to me is like super dangerous. There was a company in, there's a company in California that was developing these things, and they blew up their building and killed a guy because they were mixing oxygen and hydrogen in exactly the right mixture. So I'd be
to me, it seems a lot safer than storing large amounts of hydrogen. No matter how safe you think your tank is, if you have a large amount of it, it's definitely a lot more dangerous if you're just making a little bit at a time as you need it. And I actually knew some people in Oregon who has a patent with DuPont right now making a Mack truck that ran off of on-demand hydrogen for hours and hours. So why isn't more research being done into on-demand hydrogen versus making something that you have to store, then you have to build large things, then you have to transport? It seems
monopolies.
Let me just say, when I put up my program safety slide, I showed you all the various levels of inspections and certification for this particular system. In order to be safe, every car, people maintain them or they don't maintain them or all that. Unless you have that kind of level of safety inspection on each installation, let me just say, I wouldn't use it in my car.
Okay, but I'm not talking to you right now about my water for gas plants. What I'm talking to you about right now is if you've already got $5.3 million for this project, is there any money like that that's gone towards researching on-demand hydrogen versus
not
storing?
Really. Not really.
Do you know why that is?
The USDP are looking for big, what do I want to say? They want to look at systemic, large-scale hydrogen production to totally replace fossil fuels rather than augmenting an existing engine equipment.
And I understand that it's set up that way because the mega corporations need to keep making money. They need to store something that they can then charge you per gallon or per kilogram.
Government
But
needs
I
to
was just
cut.
wondering, I see it as a viable option. My questions for Mike were, when and where are you next going to drill? Because that's been a question I've asked several people and haven't been able to get an answer to.
Well, we have to agree the repair work that I mentioned earlier.
In November?
Yeah, mid-November.
Where?
It's on an existing well that needs to be on the location, at the facility. It's one of the 10 wells that we have already. It has some piping that needs to be replaced. The other service pull the piping out and install new piping.
just want to share just a couple of important points that I think is valuable for everybody here, but certainly for the both of you. And I appreciate you guys being here and appreciate what you're doing. For my 20 years of being a therapist, studying the stress response and how it relates to resource management, you can't separate the two. Okay? So Rapid Resolution Center for Change is my company, Optimal Resource Management. Two important things come to mind. Haste makes waste. When we make decisions out of just like what seems good and comfortable in the moment, frequently they end up being horrible decisions. Okay? My concern for you, as you mentioned, the time. Once the time is kind of feeling like it's crunching, we start to then be at risk, any of us, of making poorer decisions. You said you have a limited amount of time and PGV is willing to do this, okay? This one woman said, hey, are you willing to talk to HUPO again? And you kind of said, well, I'm not planning on doing that. I encourage you to reopen that, okay? And Ron, when I was talking about my concern, I'm not an alarmist. Actually, I'm the complete opposite. I'm the guy who's like runs around willy-nilly all optimistic, okay? But when I was bringing up my concern about the hydrogen, it's like, to me, I felt like you were so hastily, perhaps a little on the defensive, you didn't hear my question, and you were going down a completely different track. So for people to just slow down and be aware of our own hastiness and our own mission we're on. Here's a more powerful statement.
Well, let me just address that. My point was, hang on. No. I'm happy to answer that. The point I made is the wind only blows 35% of the time. So 75% of the time, I'm paying all these guys to do stuff, and they're standing around waiting for the wind to blow. I'm not getting. I'm not getting what I need out of the project.
You talking about help. It's very different from the solar. So the helpful question is the real question, because I encourage you, if you wouldn't revisit that with them, I'd be really disappointed and question you really looking at this very logically, because this actually might solve a lot of concerns that might bring greater risks. But here's the real thing I want people to keep in mind. It's a saying that to me is the most powerful thing I've probably about ever heard in my whole life. Okay? An open mind is willing to believe everything it doubts and doubt everything that it believes. That means us all coming to this room being willing to completely believe the opposite from what we walked into. Those of us that might have some I'm just standing in the middle. I don't have any specific opinions because I don't know enough about geothermal or anything. I'm just standing here trying to help people be in that middle. But those of us who are against, who might be against PGV, to be willing to open our minds that maybe there's something really good that we're missing. And those of us that are pro-geothermal, being willing to look at the complete opposite. Maybe there's something we're missing. Because unless you really have an open mind, okay, you're not going to make good decisions. You're not going to use good awareness, okay? And this whole place of geothermal is sitting on a very vulnerable spot. And this is hydrogen. It's got to have some explosive matter. Then there's pentane. All these issues really need to be looked at. So for the fact to me that you don't know the data on that, to me pops a red flag. Again, I think you're a great guy. I think you're on a great general mission. But we can all be on a great general direction and miss very important things. And I encourage all of us to make sure, if you don't have an open mind and you're willing to totally change your mind and have a totally different perspective, please remove yourself from the process, because that's not awareness, that's dangerous.
Thank you. Green shirt. Oh yeah. So I got some hydrogen questions. What's the difference between H2 and HHO?
Sorry, H2 is a gas.
H2O. And yeah, someone was telling me before that, you know, like when you have your it's more of like a question on the technology and how you like making hydrogen and stuff. Like, well, what's the different breakdowns and what is it that causes those breakdowns? And kind of also to tie into what she was also saying before, like, can she also, you know, make hydrogen, you know, of course separate keep the oxygen and hydrogen separated at all times, but have like a storage tank that you can just kind of hook up like an ox tank on.
You can store the oxygen. Exactly. In this case, the fish farmer, you know, wants to take it and use it to support his fish production.
And my other question is,
I could store the hydrogen, the oxygen. The problem is oxygen doesn't have a lot of value. I mean, it's not a very. You can buy oxygen fairly inexpensively, so there's, you know, the margins on it are pretty tight.
And my other question is for your electrolyzer with how much for kilowatt input are you getting, and also what's your range for hydrogen output?
You said 50%. So
50%. Yeah, we lose about round numbers 50% of electricity goes to them.
And then what's like your range for electricity that you're using? Is that all based on how much electricity you're receiving? Or is there a variable amount that you're playing around with right there to see how much hydrogen you get with that amount of electricity that goes in?
No, it's pretty set. I mean, it's physics about, you know, this much electricity in for that particular electrolyzer, this much hydrogen out. And you can't drop it.
That makes sense, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got some stuff that relates exactly to your situation here. So here's a couple, I'm going to knock them off fast, okay? I think it's a false premise to calculate 42 cents a kilowatt, because that's assuming you're taking it from Helco. You can go ahead and buy 6 Lister generators for under 5K each and generate that from the biodiesel over there for under 12 cents a kilowatt. So that's another option you could do, okay? And I hear you on the time. Number 2, yeah, again, you have the time issue, but the MTA, I'll bet you could go do a deal, do a financing deal where after you're done, they take the panels, they use it for their power. You could run it off solar there. You're going to eliminate all the loop transportation and a lot of other problems, and it's right there on site. Helco's 3 blocks away. I'd be surprised if you couldn't get some cooperation on them at all. Okay, next thing, and this isn't against Mike, we all like Mike, okay? But even if Mike and Ormat were or are okay and on the level, what you're facing here is we know that there's a master plan from Honolulu to industrialize our residential area down here in Puna, and you're a gateway, as they call the gateway drug, okay, to get it going. This is a part of the problem we have here, okay? We don't want to become Oahu's battery and industrial park. The other thing is going along on your budget, take it out of state. Get the power. If this is only a test, take it out of state somewhere. Go to Arizona, 8 cents kilowatt, whatever. Get it done there, okay, if you're on the time frame. The other thing, I can't believe there's no military cooperation somewhere, okay? And the other thing is permits, because I'm a contractor and I know this. It is incredible if you guys aren't having the permit through the yin-yang. Maybe you want to build a damn chicken coop, they kill you here. So that's the end of it. It's over to Bob. My comments.
Too quick.
Okay, so I got the same thing. You know, we can't. Chicken coop was my thing. He stole it. But
bicycle shed.
No, but you're saying what you're really saying is that you can produce industrially produce, even though you're calling it a research project, an inflammable gas without having to get a permit. I mean, I can't do anything at my house without a permit. How are you doing that? I wrote it in my written comments. I want a written explanation of exactly how you don't have to get a permit to produce an explosive gas. I find that incredible. I don't think that that's okay, and I'm going to object to that. And as far as the EIS, you know, you've already produced this 150-page document that has found no significant impacts, and you're going to ask for a funds. Basically, you're going to avoid the EAQ or whatever, and go to your board, and your board is going to approve this. So, but you don't even know the blast radius. You know, you can't even explain the blast radius.
I'm not anticipating it was going to be a blast.
I understand that, but so what's the worst case scenario? You have a hazardous response team coming to train for hydrogen fires, but you don't anticipate a blast. You have firewalls that you're putting up at the place where you're going to dispense the gas, but you don't anticipate a gas. You have air valves to turn on and off your things, but you don't anticipate a blast. I'm not buying that. Well, you know, you need to do an EIS. I'm sorry, Mitch, and it's not personal. It's not personal. You're trying to do an end run around doing this responsibly to save money, and you're throwing the community under the bus to do it. As always, you know, you came out here with HCPA, the laboratory, not you personally, and you threw us under the bus. Now you're coming out here and you refuse to see that this is going to lead to an industrialization of our community, because PG&E is not doing this because they're a nice guy. They're doing it to make money. They're a business. They're a corporation, a huge one, and everything centers around the bottom line. That's how it goes. They do some good things for the community, but the bottom line is that everything they do is they have to answer to shareholders. They have to answer to the family that owns that company. And so, you know, you're being dragged into this, and like I've been telling you, we want to support you. I want to support you. I want to help you find another way to do this where we all get on board with you, and so you're going to have to do the EIS. I know you're going to try and fight us on it, But if you don't do that EIS, especially if you have a problem, you're gonna be responsible. Stabilization of the grid. I got a question on how much stabilization of the grid are you going to get out of this one little unit?
We're not even hooked up to the grid on this unit. We get.
So you're not. No, but I thought this part of this whole thing was we're going to be able to use it to.
What I said is we want to look at what happens to the electrolyzer when you use it in this variable.
Okay, so this isn't going to do anything to increase the solar wind because it's not going to. Basically, the fluctuations in the grid, because this is what's being talked about. Please let me finish, and then I'll hear what you got to say. Because this is what's being talked about, that we're going to have fluctuations of the grid, and this is going to help to control those fluctuations of the grid. So now, are you saying that that's really not part of this project? That's something for the future?
That's correct.
Okay.
This part of the project
I didn't understand
is to characterize the performance of the electrolyzer in that kind of a variable mode.
Okay.
And we're doing that with batteries as well, by the way, up in Hawaii. We have a megawatt size.
Great. No, I'm all for that kind of stuff.
It's all to find out what happens to the equipment.
I'm all for that. I just want you to understand, and I know I get excited about it, but that I just think industrial applications should be done in industrially zoned areas, not in neighborhood, not in residential areas. And you got to understand that, man. And I'm going to keep saying it until I get through to you. Thank you very much for coming. It's been very informative. Appreciate you meeting with us, you too, Ron. And I give everybody a hard time. Mike will tell you I didn't pick on you guys. And Tom will tell you.
And then we hug.
Big
yes,
hug.
we do.
So
Free hugs.
The question that I have is one that really didn't get answered, only because I think it got talked around. It's about the logistics. With it being on PGV's property at the bottom lower 1 acre, and with hydrogen rising, and with the drill rig being at least 100 feet above where they're going to be doing the hydrogen, the pentane also being stored right there, so much pentane is leaking. By the time the pentane leaks out, pentane flows down towards the ground. So it's going to meet. You have to look at the impact and the MSDS between isopentane and hydrogen, or there's going to be a huge, huge mess.
Ron, I had just two quick questions of Mitch. Did you want to respond to?
I don't know about it. I don't know where it's located on the PGV property.
It needs to be in the EA, I mean.
Yeah, well, we're going to take that question. I know the arc blast radius of the pentane. And it's on the other side. Oh yeah, it's a federal requirement to do that.
62,000 if it all goes. What's the blast radius?
3,000 feet plus or minus.
Plus or minus, right?
Miles,
But
3,000.
no feet. You have to look at the probability of all 6,000.
Right.
60,000.
So let's say we have a magnitude 8 earthquake. What's the probability of the pentane?
Oh, I never heard about that. It's something that's leaking out already.
You know what I'm saying. What's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is it all goes, right?
Worst case scenario, we get eruption, everybody's gone. That's worst case scenario. Hopefully that don't.
No.
Mitch, did you have a question, or did you talk about the duration of this project time-wise?
Yeah, right now it's about 2 years from now.
Well, I did a calculation. Maybe it's because of your daily use, but it came to about $1,859 a day. You said the 65. You'd be producing about 65 kg a day, and that's about $28.60 I figured per kg, which gave you about $1,859 a day. Divided into 750 gave you about 403 days, a little bit over a year. But you're going to be running longer than that.
Well, we're not going to be operating at full.
Yeah, that's a variable. Okay. The other question is, we're hearing a lot now about funding, and I just wondered how vulnerable your funding was. We're hearing a lot about deficit reduction, deficit elimination, and I was wondering if you know whether you're in MIT's sights or not.
Our funding for this project is secure because it's already in the bank account.
Okay.
So funding going forward, who knows, you know, what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know.
Because this is 1/3 Chinese dollars is funded.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Some of it's being funded by barrel tax dollars. So.
Oh, but
a lot.
If the dollars are coming out of the federal government, 1/3 of those dollars is borrowed money.
Yeah,
2/3 is tax money. 1/3 is borrowed money. So it would relate to your.
Yeah. Right. Yes, ma'am.
If for some reason you couldn't do it at PGV, say there's an earthquake or a lava flow, but if something happened where you couldn't do it at PGV, what would be your alternative be?
Not every morning, but
I don't know. I don't have one right now. So, because the cost of the electricity would be so much that we might have to cancel the project.
Yeah. I think the EA needs to consider alternatives. You usually need to look at viable alternatives. So I think that would be.
Well, we didn't have one.
You say you didn't have an alternative, Ed?
Only to shut it down.
So
because I don't have enough money to operate that electrolyzer if I have to go out and buy it off the grid.
So it's either PGV or nothing.
Basically,
well, unless you got a similar partnership with another alternative.
Well, if I had somebody with deep pockets who wanted to give me the cash, yeah. I say if I had another funding source that wanted to fund it, yeah. But
no, I mean if there was another alternative energy projects like a wind farm.
Yeah, right, exactly. But the wind, we don't have any wind farms on this side of the island. That's one of the problems. And I want this, we want it to be a renewable energy project because I'll have the environmentalists saying, what are you doing making hydrogen using fossil fuels? I get that a lot. Henry Curtis and his team, Life of the Land, when I first came here 10 years ago, that's the first thing he hammered me on was making hydrogen using grid power because he calls it black hydrogen.
We're sort of getting into a lot of side conversations here. Maybe this is a pretty good time. I'm going to say one more comment.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks for your question.
Really good presentation. Really enjoyed.
I want to make it through this one last question. Mitch, we have a question going on here.
One last question.
Are these your cards?
Yes. So, when will you call me by after you've called helpful so we know that you're actually looking at all the alternatives so that you're not engaging in one that might be a real high risk to the community?
You run that one by me.
When will you call me after you've talked to helpful so that we know that you're looking at other alternatives that don't run a great risk to the community and might be less of a risk to the community?
I'm not planning to talk about that.
Well, I hope that you at least call me and talk to me about your defensiveness and your lack of an open mind and my concern, because I'm trying to be neutral here, and if I don't hear from you, then unfortunately it puts me in a position of being adversarial because I'm concerned that you have a closed mind and you're not safe.
Well, thank you very much.
So I hope to hear from you.
I hope to hear from you. I hope to hear from you. If I don't, I'm deeply concerned about your willingness and that you're so caught up in the initial immediate comfort that you're going for. And you're obviously a pretty aware, cautious guy, okay? You're the kind of guy that I want in those situations. Right now, I think you're going a little bit potentially like the law because you're looking for this line that seems finally all lined up for you. It's a dangerous situation. If you look on the back of my mind, one of the we can ride the wave of change. Drop the ball on the pitch.
Are you guys out of point now?
Hey, thank you. Appreciate your questions.
Who doesn't have that awareness at the moment becomes a danger. It's not a position that you probably don't in. You'll probably go out of your way to not be in. I see that kind of a I said if I don't, I'll be concerned. I'll no longer be neutral towards you. I'll feel like I have to become an adversary. I need to be able to share my time. I'm talking about the mind. I spent
20 years, I spent 20 years focusing on one thing that we're all so busy like just reacting to. I've studied that one thing. And here's the thing that hopefully will help you understand this the most. This is a biological body going through a biological environment. So because of that, we're always at risk of overly focusing and blaming the environment to the biology. It's a stress response job is doing. We're at risk of overreacting to the discomfort. But the people in geothermal, if you really going forward, are at risk of underreacting as you gain clarity. I hope to hear from you. Okay? Appreciate it. Always change the subject here. Okay. Something that was in your presentation that you should be aware of. You were saying, you know, you were mentioning the words silent and Eldorado bus in the same sentence. Yeah. Okay. I suggest you get on a blue and white Eldorado bus and spend $1 and listen to it like it's 95 decibels. I've had a decibel meter. They rattle so bad you cannot hear the engine. They rattle. The decibel level is so loud in those buses. You cannot carry on a conversation across the highway. Carry on a conversation. The person directly next to you. They're 95 decibels. They rattle so intensely. Oh, it's horrible. I'm hearing them, and it hurts my ears. And people just come out of there with ears ringing. So I suggest, you know, it's like